Was like, let me get hydrated before helping Joni out with this webinar, and then I spilled it all.
Well, I'm glad it still works.
Yeah. Luckily, it was not coffee that I spilled.
I once spilled a bowl of breakfast cereal milk on my computer. It was not a good
Um,
day.
I once spilled a smoothie on it. It was like purple smoothie, which I'll probably be drinking later. I made one this morning, but I won't, you know, freak everyone out with my giant purple glass at the very beginning.
Hey,
Just know it's coming.
hydration is important.
Mhm. Mm.
Welcome, everyone. Get cozy in the room. Going to give it another minute as folks continue joining us here. All right. We'll give it maybe 30 seconds before we jump in. All right, let's get started. So good morning and welcome everyone to the second meeting of the Developing Clean Electricity Generation and Transmission Policy Working Group. My name is Joni Sliger. I'm an analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy, and I'm joined by a team of ODO staff here. Jason Sermon will be moderating the chat. Ruchi Sadir and Jessica Rikers will be facilitating our discussion. Edith Bayer is sharing your screen. Hugh Arsenault is taking notes. Stacy Huberger is managing our WebEx. Stacy, are we recording? And Josh Price is providing technical assistance. So if you have any issues during this meeting, you can send him a direct message in the chat or send him an email. I should have just received an email from him in your inbox, so should have that ready to hand.
And Joni,
Next
yes,
slide.
we are recording.
Perfect. Thank you, Stacy. As a reminder, ODO's mission is to help Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. We advance solutions to shape an equitable clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. Next slide, please. Today, again, we're using WebEx. So members of the policy working group are here as panelists. And as panelists, you should see controls at the bottom of your screen to mute and unmute yourself and to turn your camera on and off. You can also raise your hand when you have a question or type it in the chat on the bottom right. We may have some members of the public listen in as attendees, and I believe we do today. So attendees cannot participate in the discussion or the chat, but we do have a public comment portal. So if you're joining us, we welcome comments there at any time. Next slide, please. Just to remember, we are one of 5 policy working groups. Our focus is on electricity generation and storage in front of the meter, on transmission, and on the development needs and barriers or competing priorities associated with those. Next slide, please. I think I'll hand to Ruchi to cover the next few.
Thank you, Joni. Welcome, everyone. As Joni said, my name is Ruchi Sadir. I'm Associate Director for Strategic Engagement at Oregon Department of Energy. I'm really excited to be here to help support the team in this policy working group today. So this is a reminder, something you've actually seen before. Joni tells me that you've seen this before, but I wasn't at that meeting. So I wanted to remind myself. We're going to go through just a few like process and purpose slides. And as we go through these, I was hoping that, if you have questions come up, in your mind, you can throw them in the chat. We want to make sure that we're aligned on why we're here and how we're approaching our work together. So this first one is really the purpose. This is a lot of time that we're asking you to spend with us, and we are, going to be really engaging on what these modeling results were and how to move forward in policy discussions. We're going to build on that. Like the model itself and what came out of it is not what the energy strategy is. It's actually what we all talk about. That's like a kind of a foundation that we're going to build from. And so the clean electricity and generation transmission pieces of those policy discussions is what you all will be helping us with. We're going to be thinking about what the existing policy landscape is as compared to what else might be happening as a result of those modeling results. What are the policy gaps and opportunities that you're seeing in the existing policy landscape? And then together, we're hoping that we can hear from you what kinds of policy ideas could help fill those policy gaps, take advantage of those opportunities, and advance Oregon's clean energy goals and goals around decarbonization that are in statute while keeping the lights on and cost affordable. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of who is in this policy working group. As you can see, we have a wide swath of people in the room, and this is, a really big time commitment. We're just so grateful that you're all here and participating in this process. Next slide, please. We have a lot to discuss today. So we have these group agreements that we're putting in for every policy working group. It's really just a way to help us interact together. We want to hear everyone's perspective, and we want everyone to feel comfortable sharing their perspective. And my job is to help, facilitate that. And so this is one of the things that I'll be thinking about when helping to bring forward questions or encourage discussion from others that we haven't heard from. We want to make sure that we are listening carefully and trying to hear what people are saying to understand their perspective, and really encourage respectful, candid, constructive conversation while keeping an open mind. We really are wanting to hear your questions. Sometimes we're going to be in the slide mode. That's what the chat's for. We have a number of people, like Joni said, who are keeping an eye on that, and I'm going to take the job of with Jessica later as well to bring those forward for discussion. We want to be open, transparent, inclusive, and accountable, respect differing opinions, and seek to resolve differences and seek to find common ground. I'm also going to try to look and see, who's been speaking and try to bring forward voices that we haven't heard. So if you've noticed that you've been speaking a lot, think about stepping back to allow space for others. It says limit chat conversation. The real purpose there is that we don't want to have too much of like a side conversation happening in the chat while we're talking about something else. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't use the chat. I'm going to try to vocalize what I see in the chat so folks who are maybe not following the chat can hear what they're saying, what you all are saying, and kind of bridge that. So that's what that last one means. And again, if you have any questions about these group agreements or the previous slide on purpose, put them in the chat. Next slide, please. This is some guidance that we're going to be using in terms of how this meeting will work. We are focused today on identifying barriers, specifically those that are related to electricity generation and transmission. And in doing this, we're going to be centering on the findings from the modeling in phase 1 that our contractor helped us with. But, as I've said, the modeling results themselves don't provide a specific future state. It just really gives us some valuable information about the effects of different energy policies on Oregon's economy. It's just one set of information that's guiding our discussion. And as you can see on the graphic on the right here, there's other considerations that we're not directly part of the modeling. And those are important lenses that we need your help in bringing forward to understand potential barriers to specific policy actions. So examples here could be, how different policy options that you're hearing or different barriers associated with those might affect consumer costs or local energy resilience. How would environmental justice or community-specific goals be affected? You can consider all of these when we get into discussion in the whiteboarding exercise later in the meeting. And you might notice that there are some differing opinions on those, and that's okay. That's okay for today. Just we want to surface all of those and make sure that we're all seeing each other's understanding of what those barriers are and move into discussion to make sure we're all kind of understanding each other on those barriers. I know it can be challenging to not just like jump ahead to, okay, well, here are the barriers, here are some solutions. If solutions come up, that's fine. We'll add them to sort of a bike rack parking lot for the next meeting. And I might try to rephrase some of those solutions that you're thinking of to draw a dotted line to what that barrier might be. We want to sort of capture that thinking. If you're a problem solver, that's great. We're excited that you're here. That's going to be the focus of the next meeting. And today we're going to be really focused on the barriers themselves. So with that, again, I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but wanting to invite you to put them in there if you have any. Next slide, please. This is our agenda for today, and it's lighter on presentation and more focused on discussion. I think that Joni promised that last time, so you can all know that she keeps her promises. We're going to go around and actually introduce ourselves. I know that didn't get a chance, that didn't get to happen exactly verbally last time, so we really want you all to hear each other. And so then there's going to be a bit of a refresher from Joni, and then we're going to go into these group discussions using Miro, which is a whiteboard tool. We have some slides if you're not familiar with that. We'll take a 10-minute break in the middle, and then we'll continue our discussion in Miro. Just a note that in the last discussion, I'm going to be handing off to Jessica to take care of the facilitation role. And then there'll be a discussion of next steps, and you'll adjourn for lunch. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions yet in the chat about the how and the why, so I think we can go to group discussions. I'm actually going to ask to take the slides down for this, and I'm going to put the prompts in the chat that we're going to use. If you're able to, it'd be really great to put your camera on at this time so everyone can see each other. We're going to ask for your name, pronouns if you're comfortable, affiliation, focus of your work, and then the real prompting question is, what is one policy area you're hoping to discuss in this group? So I'm going to go through, try to make it a little easier on all of you to walk through sort of the panelist list I have here. I'm going to sort of say one person's name and then give you a heads up that I'm going to call on you next so you know to get ready. Okay, so the first person I have here is Alyssa, and then after that I have Chris Golightly.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Sorry for the chaotic background. I couldn't figure out how to hide that from you all. So, but it's nice to be here. It's good to meet all of you. My name is Alyssa Benini. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. I am a legislative and policy analyst focusing on natural resources issues, so including solar energy and offshore wind, which are two topics that I'm hopeful that we can at least touch on in part today. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Alyssa. Chris Golightly, and then after that is Crystal Grinnell. Oh, I don't think I can hear you, Chris. I know. I don't think you're on mute either, which is usually the first thing to get out of the way. Also, my son is home from school and wanted to join this policy group meeting. So, Chris, we're going to come back to you, but we'll go to Crystal Grinnell, and after that, Commissioner Doran.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Crystal Grinnell. I am with the Water Resources Department. I'm with the policy group there, and my role is primarily leading the development of the integrated water resources strategy. So I will really be on water for this discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Crystal. Commissioner Doran, and after that, Diane Brandt. Commissioner Doran, are you able to come off mute? No. Okay. Well, we'll come back to you, Commissioner. Diane Brandt, and after that, Hannah Donnie-Hanlon.
Hi, good morning. Diane Brandt, and I'm with Renewable Northwest and Policy and Legislative Affairs Director. We're working on utility scale decarbonization of the grid around the region. And so I think that covers a lot of things that I'm hoping to talk about in this policy group. So just addressing what are the real barriers we're seeing right now, from transmission to getting things online and permitted. So the whole gamut. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane. Hannah, you're next. And then after that, we can go back to Chris Golaley.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Hannah Dondi Kaplan with Bonneville Power Administration. I'm in our Government Affairs Department. I cover Oregon legislative and government affairs and energy policy, largely here in a listening capacity. So I can take information back to our transmission team as needed.
Thank you, Hannah. I saw Commissioner Doran come on camera, so we might try you again if you would like to introduce yourself. Let's see, it looks like your mute is still on. No. Okay. Stacey, are you able to unmute them?
It looks like they are unmuted. It may be there is a drop-down arrow next to your mute button. You may have to change your speaker or microphone settings there.
Okay, we'll come back around. We'll see. And if you wanted to introduce yourself in the chat, that's totally fine too. Thank you for being here. I'm gonna go, let's see, we did Hannah. So Jared Hansen, and then after that, Jacob from PG.
Jared Hansen, he, him, his, those are the pronouns I use. Idaho Power is where I work in resource planning. And a couple of things that are interesting there. We're experiencing more than 8% growth annual over the next 5 years. So that's more than a 40% increase of our load in the next few years. Most of that is like large base load increase. So we have some real challenges when it comes to meeting those loads in the next few years. It'd be nice to address permitting. We have our Boardman to Hemingway line, which we've been working on for more than, well, almost 20 years now. So transmission's just identified as one of those key resources in every clean energy plan, but it's extremely difficult to get in place in time for it to meet the needs. So that's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate you being here. Jacob, and then after that, Jennifer.
Good morning. Jacob Goodspeed, Portland General Electric. I lead a team here at PGE that thinks about how and when do we bring solar energy, wind energy, battery storage, transmission into our portfolio. So really looking forward to discussing policy, definitely around permitting, but also around sustainable development. How do we make sure that we're moving a decarbonized future in a way that's good for all of our governments? So thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Jacob. I could hear you, but you were a little quiet, just in case there's a microphone setting that you want to play around with for next time.
Okay, put the heads up.
It's always nice to do these introductions to test all that stuff too before we get into discussion. Appreciate that. Jennifer, and then Jeremy Thompson.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Jennifer. I'm with the Department of Energy. I'm the Division Assistant for Planning and Innovation. So I'm here listening. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jennifer. Jeremy and then Jess.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Jeremy Thompson. I'm with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm our energy program coordinator. So I represent fish wildlife habitat issues in any renewable energy siting.
Thanks, Jeremy. Jess and then John from ODF.
Good morning, everyone. Jess Grady Benson with Rogue Climate. Organizing director, I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. And I'm really interested in digging into, as we ensure a clean energy transition, how to make sure it's done in a just and equitable way for the communities most impacted by climate change and also by any potential development.
Thanks, Jess. John and then John from EWEB after that.
Yeah, John Karzik, Oregon Department of Forestry, focused primarily around areas of transmission and generation, both of high interest and keen interest.
Thank you, John. Over to John Hart from EWEB.
Hi, this is John Hart with EWEB. I'm our power planning supervisor, focused on integrated resource planning, a variety of other things. Really interested in generally talking about, what types of resources will be available for the future, where and when those things might be developed, and I think most importantly, how we're going to get them from where they are to where they need to be.
Thank you for being here. I didn't give you a heads up, but Justin, I was going to call on you next, and then after that, Laura Tabor.
Good morning. My name's Justin DeMello. I'm with Economic Development for the City of Hillsborough. So my focus is on economics and supporting industry, especially the tech sector, which is a cornerstone of our state economy. So focused on how to accelerate the delivery of new transmission, I think will be probably my main lens, but it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you for being here, Justin. Laura, and then after that, Natalia.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Laura Tabor. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Climate Action Director for the Nature Conservancy in Oregon. TNC's goals in the energy space are making sure we help meet Oregon's clean energy goals with least impact to nature and communities. So I do a lot of work around energy siting and branching into transmission. And so excited to talk about all of those topics in this group and how we accelerate development in the least, I can't speak this morning, least conflict places.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, I got an extra cup of coffee as soon as I got home from daycare. Let's see, Natalia, and then after that, Neil.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Because I had a challenge with the mic as well. So my name is Natalia Stranatka, Oregon Department of State Land Policy and Planning Unit. I'm more interested in land use change policy part here and natural resource impact, as you indicated in your slide. But also, so Department of State Land manage the state land onshore and offshore. I'm also part of the offshore wind roundtable meeting, so kind of policy streamline, but also to provide this consistency and cooperation between different work streams, and also kind of expert matter, subject expert matter there, because my background relate to environmental engineer, climatology, and public policy, so it's different. I worked almost 15 years internationally with the United Nations and the World Bank in different countries, focusing on energy and urban infrastructure development project, and was international greenhouse gases expert to calculate those emissions internationally. So those kind of three things. And looking forward to work with you all. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Natalia. Neil, and then Pat.
Hi, Neil Jones. I'm in area transmission planning with Pacific Corp. I'm basically, sitting in for Scott Mostly listening and then reporting back to him what I hear.
Thank you, Neil.
And that's Scott Beyer.
Yes, thank you. And then Pat, and then after that, Patty.
Hi, I'm Pat DeLaQuille. I am a retired energy systems modeler and climate policy analyst. I've worked my entire career in clean energy. I have a degree in nuclear engineering, and I've worked in solar and other renewables since 1980. I'm looking forward to helping to understand better the modeling work and how that fits into policy, and looking for a balance between what we need to do on the transmission side and what we should be doing on the distribution side as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. Patty, and then Petra.
Hi, everyone. My name's Patty Sakowitz. I'm with Pacific Corp, and I have just started in a transmission policy role here. I'm still learning, so I will also mostly be in listening mode today.
Thank you for being here, Patty. Petra, and then after that, Robin.
Hey, good morning. My name is Petra Sheets. I'm the Interim Community Development Director and Planning Director for Benton County. And I don't use pronouns, but what we're interested in right now is the agricultural high-stress water supplies. So water is a big one, as well as we are delving into a regional effort to align with the state efforts, energy and sustainable materials management. So we're really interested in how to make those connections. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra, and also thanks for helping me pronounce your name correctly.
Sorry.
Let's see, Robin, and then Ryan Perry.
Good morning. My name is Robin Hayakawa. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a land use attorney for Central Oregon Land Watch. So I'm sitting in for my colleague Roy Isbell, and our interest is in the land use implications of Oregon's clean energy transition. I would say particularly as it applies to farmland. I think similar to what Laura was saying, we're interested in supporting the energy transition and also identifying areas of least conflict for renewable energy.
Thank you, Robin. Ryan, and then Shauna.
Morning, everyone. I'm Ryan Perry. I'm with Tillamook People's Utility District, Key Accounts and Energy Services Manager. I oversee all energy efficiency for us here. It's kind of a quasi power resource manager. I work hand in hand with our large industrial customers, the cheese factory. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Tillamook Cheese and a couple of lumber mills. I am representing the Oregon PUD Association here today, and I would say my interest is in firm load capacity, non-emitting resources, hopefully changing the tides on nuclear for our state potentially or something like that. Yeah, thanks.
It's really interesting. Thank you, Ryan. And now I'm going to probably get some Tillamook cheese for my son for a snack later. Shauna, and then after that, Shannon.
Hi, everyone. Shauna Brownstein. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with a company called Rowan Digital Infrastructure. And if you're like, wait a minute, I thought you were at Northwest Natural or PGE or Tesla. I was with those companies, but I'm now with Rowan Digital Infrastructure. We build sustainable data centers for hyperscale customers that share our climate goals. And my interest is around really like, how can the data center sector become more of a grid asset? How can we participate in this in a really constructive way, both from a generation standpoint and using carbon-free energy, but also how can we get the energy to where we need it? And how can we continue to support the communities that we exist in, like Umatilla County or Morrow County, and then also in communities like Hillsborough? Thanks.
Thank you. Shannon, and then Sydney.
Hi there. Sorry, I'm just stepping into my office, so I'll be on camera shortly. Shannon Souza. I have a consulting and contracting firm down on the South Coast in Coos Bay, Soul Coast Consulting and Design. Been in renewables for a little bit over 20 years. The location on the South Coast has helped to inform my policies and advocacy on behalf of my clients, really for these end of the line communities So really interested in firm generating capacity and capturing those locational values in all of our modeling exercises, many of which don't do so now. So my clients include trade organizations, Oregon Solar and Storage Industry Association, tribes, community-owned utilities, and private developers of both intentional communities and utility scale solar and clean fuels.
Thanks, Shannon. Just a note, when you're on your computer later, the Miro board is a little easier to use when you're not on the phone, but sounds like maybe you'll do that later. Sydney and then Tamara.
Hey gang, good morning. Thank you. I'm Sydney Villanueva, go by she, her. I'm a transmission attorney, many of you know, with my own firm, Blue Skies Law, but today I'm here on behalf of the Northwest and Intermountain Power Producers Coalition, or NIPSI, where I work as a senior policy advisor. The focus of NIPSI's work is advocating for competitive power opportunities, including on the transmission front. So I'm probably listening for opportunities in the transmission sphere. And happy to be part of the conversation. So thanks, folks.
Thanks for being here. And then Tamara, you're the last one on my list. So go ahead.
Okay, good morning. I'm Tamara Mabbitt, and I'm the planning director in Morrow County. I'm in my 34th year as a land use planner, and I've spent a lot of years working on transmission, non-renewable and renewable energy projects. And I don't know, a couple of you asked if I would be involved. It feels like this is maybe my 10th policy working group committee. I might sound a little cynical, but I still believe in the land use process in Oregon. So I'm here really mostly to listen and be a resource. But I am interested in cumulative impacts of projects and transmission siting. And I would love to see if we can move this discussion to look at consolidated transmission line siting. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamara. Really appreciate you being here. Chris, I see your hand up. Oh, don't hear ya.
Okay, I got it. I'm on my phone, so note if you're on your phone, you might need to double unmute. So I'm Chris Golightly. I'm a policy analyst with the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. I work on many things, but one of them being implementing our energy vision for the Columbia River Basin. It's a vision that tries to guide the Northwest energy transition in a way, a fish-friendly way that's least impactful on the fishery resource that's important to our tribes. And so my interest here is to make sure that that voice is carried forward in these policies and considerations and development of energy generation resources that are least impactful, and as also transmission considerations and siting. A lot of that ends up being on tribal lands. So that interest as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I think that Commissioner Doran, we wanted to hear from you. If you're not able to unmute, if there's a technical issue, you're welcome to sort of introduce yourself in the chat. I'm also checking to see if one of my colleagues can just give you a quick phone call to figure out the settings so that we can have you participate. We're really glad that you're here. So stay tuned on that, Commissioner. Okay, so thank you all for the introductions. I know that takes a minute, but it's really important because we want you to interact with each other in the whiteboard as well as through discussion. So really appreciate you playing along and introducing yourselves and your interest in the policy area you're hoping to discuss. Before I hand it back to Joni, you heard a lot about why we're here, what we're doing. It was a lot of slides. There's been a lot of meetings, but this is a space where I want to just pause, give you some awkward silence. Do you have any questions about why you're here and what we're covering today, how this fits into the big picture? This is your awkward silence. I'm going to make you all feel it with me. Tamara, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Can you just briefly explain how this work would fit into other working groups that are happening in the state? And then maybe how this work group might feed into the current legislative session? Thank you.
That's great. I'm going to take the second question first and then briefly say that the first question is going to be addressed a little bit by Joni in a subsequent slide. So the way that I think about it is that this is a policy working group that's surfacing ideas for policy action that will feed into a report that's due to the legislature and governor in the fall. So our work it won't be done in time for the current legislative session, but we are well aware, and there are many people in this room who are tracking current legislative conversation. So we're going to try to sort of keep it separate, but be aware that the space to sort of advocate for bills is in a building in Salem that none of us are maybe in right now, but this room is where we can acknowledge that those policy conversations are happening and that they're of interest and understand how they might fit into the longer term sort of trajectory of Oregon. And the real goal, I think, and I want Joni to sort of jump in, is to identify near-term policy actions. And those near-term policy actions, we've debated, what does that mean? It could mean, as soon as the 26th legislative session after this report will be in, but maybe as far as like 4 to 5 years after that. The energy strategy modeling results as a whole provides a directional sense. As you go further in time in that directional sense, it's less precise. There's less known. And so we just want to understand what those directions are to help us inform our nearer term policy actions that you all can help us think through. And then let's see how the other policy groups interact with each other. We will be having a plenary session at the end that you'll be able to hear what everybody else talked about. And we're also having advisory group meetings once a month that are surfacing kind of that big picture, but I'll let Joni kind of build on that. I know she has a slide on it too.
Yeah, thanks, Ruchi. I agree with everything Ruchi just said. But yeah, as you can tell by the size of the room here, there's a lot of different aspects of the energy strategy. So we are convening 5 different policy working groups and are working on Odo's side to kind of stay in touch with each other as we proceed on what we're hearing. So we'll try to bring that in. Just to preview an example, when we get to the Miro board, you'll see the Environmental Justice and Equity Working Group met on Monday, and we've brought over as examples a couple of the sticky notes of what we saw from that group there to kind of help start this conversation, but trying to keep the connections there and keep the conversation moving ahead while having the groups of a size that we can have these really important discussions. So I appreciate you all being here.
Thanks for the question, Tamara. Joni, do you want to go ahead on the refresher here? That was a good segue.
Yeah, wonderful segue. All right. So this is a quick refresher. Here we've got kind of the meetings. Just as a reminder, on February 12th when we met, we had that plenary session. Our consultant, Jeremy Hargreaves, presented on the Energy Pathways modeling results. And then in our breakout session, I covered our 5 key findings from the model results and how the modeling results provide direction for our discussion. And we're going to discuss that again more in a minute. But one thing we heard there was an ask for materials to be shared before meetings, and I mentioned we were working on some. So you should have received an email from me since that meeting with a link to the key findings summary document from the modeling results for our group. And I'll ask if someone on the team can drop that in the chat, please. I also noted we were working on to schedule an opportunity for people who still have questions about the modeling to talk more with our consultant, Jeremy. So you also should have received an email from me with these details as well as the WebEx call information. But March 7th from 10 to 11 a.m., we're going to have optional office hours. That is the priority time for this group. Now, if you can't join at that time, you're welcome to join any of the other office hour sessions, but they are going to be focused on the other groups. So your questions will be in the queue after those of the working group that's up that day. And in general, all of these office hours are entirely optional. You're not obligated to attend them, but they are available if that would be helpful and of interest to you. Relatedly, I wanted to pause for a minute and just remind folks that there's a lot of information up on our website about the modeling. So in addition to the key findings document, our modelers have a summary energy strategy technical approach document. We've got a summary of key assumptions and sources for the modeling. There is a phase 1 public comment and response document. For those who are following, phase 1 was the section where we had the stakeholder engagement to discuss setting up the model and what assumptions and sources to put into it. So that response document addresses a lot of the questions and concerns we heard at that time, can be helpful. And one moment, I will drop those links as well into our chat. Got them here. All right. And additionally, coming soon, our consultants are working to finalize a written technical report. So we'll share that as soon as it's available. Something else we discussed on the 12th is that there are a number of complementary analyses that are underway. And we're going to have a webinar of some of those on March 13th from 1:30 to 3. I would encourage you all to either attend a webinar live or review the recording. I'll email the group when that recording is posted to our website. And then there's one other change to our schedule I want to highlight on this slide. We had intended to kind of start discussing policy gaps today, but we also were asked. Ooh, is that Commissioner Duran? I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sorry about the interruption.
No, not at all. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Dan Dorn, Umatilla County Commissioner. I apologize for the interruption. We have security where WebEx does not work with our computers when they're standalone, and I'm in a motel room, so that sorry about the confusion. Yes, I'm very interested. Umatilla County is kind of the in the heart and the throb of all of the non-carbon fuels, whether it be hydroelectric, solar, wind, and then probably has the most transmission lines transversing our county than any other county in the state. So we're very much involved in this, but we also were innovators when it came to natural gas cogen plants. We still have those operating. We're exploring very deeply nuclear SMR projects and how they can fit in and expedite the delivery of energy. We have lots of high energy users, irrigation with thousands of horsepower pumps pumping water out of the Columbia River for irrigation. We have food processors. We have multiple distribution centers that are transferring into robotics, which are very high energy use, not just for the robotics themselves, but for the information that drives those robotics. So we're very much in the throes of this. We were disappointed that nuclear wasn't, and SMRs was not included in the original strategy modeling. We did listen and hear that some of that is a trade-off with other non-carbon energy sources that may or may not come in the future. We understand that all of them will need some legislative attention, and hopefully that SMRs, or at least the generation of that power, can be included in a strategy if we're going to use an all of the above type of discussion. So thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Before I talk policy gaps, I just want to clarify for anyone who's new to the room, nuclear and small modular reactors were an option for the model to select in, not cited in Oregon, but cited other places in the West. The model was looking at the 11 Western US states. As Commissioner Duran said, it was not selected by the model as an option. So that is, yeah, excited to hear more about the barriers and some issues as we get into the whiteboarding exercise later on.
Yeah, Joni, just to add to that, this is Alan Zelenka, Assistant Director for ODO. the reason it wasn't selected, as with other kinds of options, was because there were this is a least cost model, and it picks the least cost options first, and SMRs and other things like floating offshore wind are just too expensive to get in the model because there's many options that would be picked before it by the model.
Yeah, and I think that even those comments may be a little different than what the federal energy programs have pointed out, especially in blended energy generation programs. So I'm interested to see how this conversation goes, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to clarify that, the information that we used on cost was federal. It was from NREL and other national labs that we used as an objective assessment and analysis to identify the costs and future costs of all the resources in the model.
Thanks, Alan. I think we can get into that a little bit more too, to try to make sure that people are all on the same page of like sort of what the model said and didn't say, and what assumptions were there and weren't, and how we can build from there. I also wanted to just pause and note, I noticed that a few more working group members joined after we did introductions. And so I just wanted to provide a space to welcome them and to ask if they were able to come off mute and just introduce yourself to the group. I noticed that Joshua, Anahi, and Alec joined. Are you able to introduce yourself with your name, pronouns if you're comfortable, affiliation, focus of your work, and what is one policy area you're hoping to discuss in this group?
Yeah, it's Alex Schiebel, Umatilla Electric Cooperative, Government Relations Manager. Sorry, I missed the first meeting. I had a conflict in Salem during ledge session. I'm in this group, the transmission group, because I think as Commissioner Doran just spoke to, it's a big deal for us. We do a lot of it. We do it right. We do it well. We do it quickly. And so I'm really interested in kind of where this group goes. And, concerns are policies that slow things down for us. Optimism is things that make it go faster, permitting. Thank you.
Good morning, Joshua Bassofin with Climate Solutions, he, him pronouns. I am very interested in just the general topic of this working group of clean energy and transmission. Very much fits my work. I am particularly interested in the dialogue we were just having around cost. Specifically around how costs were estimated for sort of long lead time resources. I'm thinking about offshore wind and geothermal, and just more interested to kind of dig into how those costs were compared to each other for those kinds of resources. Thanks.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Anaís Segovia Rodriguez. I'm the Energy Justice Coordinator at Verde. I use she, her pronouns. And one thing that I'm excited to talk about, I don't think there's one. I think I'm just generally over interested in the overall conversation and hearing what other folks have to say, and trying to understand different perspectives. And yeah, really, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Welcome to year 3, and I'm going to pass it back to Joni.
Welcome all. So jumping back in, there was one other change on our schedule that I wanted to highlight on this slide. I think on the 12th, we had noted we might start discussing policy gaps today, but one thing we heard was an ask to share a list of policies that currently exist in Oregon. And we can't do that exactly, but I will give a preview of the existing policies. That is something for you all to reflect on before our next meeting on March 17th, when we'll be reviewing what we hear today, talk about some learnings from the complementary analyses, and dig in there on the policy gaps and policy ideas. So we'll look at the schedule again at the end of today's meeting for next steps, but this is a high-level look. Next slide, please. So on the 12th, we presented these 5 key findings from the modeling, which are described more in that key findings document I mentioned. And just to share again, some things to note is that the model shows a significant amount of near-term load growth. The model finds that both in-state and out-of-state resources contribute to a least cost supply portfolio. The model showed Oregon didn't have sufficient physical transmission capacity to meet the modeled electricity flows that are needed. The model consistently builds more generating capacity. And as we look to decarbonizing our electricity system, that may require more policy action than we have today. Next slide. Thank you. So all of that, the modeling, as Richie was saying earlier, gives us a foundation and it gives us a direction for our conversations today. The modeling results are not themselves the energy strategy. It's just guidance for us to move forward. So the direction we can take from this, I think, is that electricity is a key fuel for Oregon and a key fuel for Oregon to meet its climate goals. And there are different pathways across the model scenarios and sensitivities that give us ways to think about how we might expand our system. But at a higher level, in all scenarios, what we saw is that the electricity system has to expand pretty significantly. So with that direction on kind of the what, the challenge for this group is to discuss the how. We need to expand the electricity system. How do we do that? Next slide, please. And so on the 12th, we discussed these having 4 categories as an organizational tool for our conversation. Those are in the table on the right. Those category titles, they aren't set in stone and we might readjust depending on how our conversation evolves. But they're intended, again, as an organizational tool and with the intent that those kind of give us the umbrella we need to both capture the direction from the model, that we need more in-state generation, we need more imported from out of state, we need more transmission, and we need to be more efficient if we can in how we use our electricity infrastructure. But also capturing the intent that these categories provide space for our policy discussions to consider the many key considerations for building an energy strategy, including ones that the model wasn't able to fully account for. So the model solved for Oregon's climate goals, it solved for least cost solutions at an economy-wide level, and it solved for reliability within the electricity sector. But you know, it couldn't solve for everything. There are a lot of key considerations as shown in this graphic. The model included some of these, some to an extent, and wasn't able to directly include others. We have some complementary analyses that will help be building on that for some of these. But for our discussions, these are all key considerations for this group to have in mind as we consider that challenge of how we move forward towards achieving Oregon's climate goals. And so I wanted to pause here to remind us that Odo is asking all of you to take in those modeling results in that direction, but also use your professional and your lived experience to consider energy policy for Oregon and how we balance the barriers and competing priorities around different energy opportunities. Next slide, please. So we have those 4 categories, and this is the matrix we went over on the 12th. Remember, all of the working groups are filling out a matrix similar to this one to help us track our progress and kind of work through these together. So our focus for today is that column 2, identifying barriers or competing priorities so we can work on building an issue statement that'll inform our policy discussions. So we're going to be doing a brainstorming activity today using a whiteboard and Miro. And I'll just preview here for each of these 4 categories we have, there's going to be space for you to jot your notes on the relevant barriers or competing priorities you see. And to spark some thinking, there's going to be prompting questions under each of those. So for example, on facilitating responsible development, you might have thoughts specific to siting we've heard already, or thoughts specific to small or community scale generation or specific to in-state transmission. You might see a barrier to doing those things, or you might want to elevate a competing priority that needs consideration in discussing that. So we're really looking for everyone to voice kind of all of those on the board today. And those prompts are not meant to be limiting. They're just to spark thinking. So each category additionally has a catch-all space. And if none of these categories fit kind of something you're thinking of that's in scope for this working group, there's also parking lot spaces where you can put ideas that don't seem to fit into these buckets. So that brainstorming and discussion is going to be at the heart of today's meeting. And then after today, we're going to work to kind of synthesize and capture what we heard and summarize it, hopefully in issue statement form. And so we'll start our next meeting by going over that, what we heard. And then we'll be, as I said, discussing policy gaps and start to formulate proposed strategies to address the barriers and competing priorities we discussed today. So next slide. So all of that was kind of where we came from and where we're going. Ruchi covered this slide earlier today, but just wanted to bring us all back again that today's focus is really on focusing on those barriers and competing priorities. I think that covers the refresher. Ruchi, how are we doing on questions?
I'm not seeing any hands up or questions in the chat right now. But do want to just give you another awkward silence here, because before we go into the Miro board, whiteboard stuff, basically want to give you space to ask any questions of the guidance here, or what we're asking for.
I think we'll pause again after the next. We've got a little more presentation before we can dive in.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe if you're thinking of any questions on the next ones, just throw them in the chat as you go. Thanks, Joni.
Thanks, Ruchi. All right. So as I mentioned, in thinking ahead towards our next meeting, just wanted to preview some things for you to be considering over the coming weeks. Next slide, please. So these are some questions to kind of organize your thoughts, to please consider what existing policies are in place that help address the barriers to competing priorities we discussed today, where are additional policies or programs needed, or adjustments to existing policies or programs needed, and what are the policy gaps that you're really want to discuss within this group. Next slide, please. So a couple of things to keep in mind for this. One is that our main focus as a group is going to be state level policies, and those can take different forms. Could be mandates like clean energy targets in House Bill 2021, incentives like tax credits, studies or state-led conversations like this energy strategy, or programs like Oto's County Energy Resilience Grant Program, which I just want to note has an application deadline this week on Friday. So that's kind of the main focus. The energy strategy will have recommendations for the Oregon State Legislature and possibly the governor's office. There's a lot of non-state level policies, and those are relevant to our discussion and provide important context as we think about policy gaps and what the state of Oregon can do. Next slide, please. And as we've started to talk a little bit earlier today, another thing to consider is timing really matters for policy implementation. So our energy strategy is due November 1st this year. So our focus is, as we said, kind of near term, not right now. It might come up in the 2026 legislative session. Our next long session is 2027. That seems like the likely time frame for further discussion on whatever recommendations we're able to make. And so as we're thinking about that timing, we need to be considering what the current policy landscape looks like, but also be mindful of all of the ongoing work that's underway that might change the policy landscape, and that we don't want to be just duplicating existing effort on. Next slide, please. And another thing to keep in mind is that not all of our state level policies today are, or in the future need to be, necessarily universally applicable. Just looking at the electricity system, we're part of a regional grid, we're all connected, but we do have 41 different electric utilities operating in the state. This is a map of the different service territories. And that's not counting our electricity service suppliers. But next slide, please. And as we think about our different utilities, this slide illustrates just a kind of one example of how they're not all similarly situated. I pulled this chart together using data published by the Department of Environmental Quality. It shows electricity sales from 2010 to 2023. Some of our utilities sell a lot more electricity than others. Some have experienced more growth in recent years. And so as we think about the challenges our utilities are facing, they're not all similarly situated. And the policy support doesn't need to be one size fits all as we move out of it. So take a couple more quick slides. Next one, please. And yes, the next two slides are extremely busy, but this was kind of the preview for people to think about. We're not going to walk through everything on these slides, but as I mentioned earlier, the last time we met, there was an ask for Odo to provide a list of existing energy policies, and I'm sorry, but we're not going to be able to do that. It wouldn't be a list. It would look a lot more like a book or a couple of books, but here we've got a draft list, decidedly not exhaustive, but of the Oregon state statutes and administrative rules. And I just want to recognize that there's a lot here. And there's a lot more underway. If we can go to the next slide. So here's a non-existent list of kind of active work streams going on in Oregon and in the region that, as I mentioned, give us some important context. So again, not walking through here, just recognize there's a lot, but in today's meeting, we'll discuss barriers and competing priorities. And then in our next meeting, we'll consider what we discussed today and talk about how that might focus in, I think, on specific areas of policy for further discussion. So between now and our next meeting, we'll be sharing these slides. Hope that they are helpful and can spur your reflections and thinking for our next meeting. But we're looking forward to getting into this more then. One more slide. So again, here's some questions for you to consider. I think that covers it.
Thanks, Joni. And so, like today is the focus is the barriers. And so Joni's kind of helping to tee up why that matters. And I saw Joshua's hand up, so I wanted to see if he wanted to come off mute.
Yeah, thanks, Richie. Joni, thanks for that presentation. On the slide that you had sort of on the policy development trajectory, looking at future legislative sessions, short session next year, long session 2027, do you anticipate that this group will be sort of ideating on legislative proposals, and would we even be workshopping legislative proposals? What's the kind of like scope of looking at that?
I don't think, thanks for that question, Joshua. I don't think we're going to be aiming or setting the ambition of trying to come up with specific legislative concepts, but we'll be looking kind of to elevate things for legislators to consider in their discussions and kind of, I expect at that level, but Ruchi or Ida, I don't know if there's more you want to layer on there.
Joshua, I'm going to give you like a lawyer's answer, which is it depends. It depends on this group. So if you all are able to get to a level of specificity where there's a lot of common ground, I think that's worth, talking about more. Looking at other energy strategies that other states have developed, they didn't really get to a level of detail that I would call like a legislative concept. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. So, the challenge is yours. I've noticed that a lot of the energy strategies out there help to provide like a sense of what the ideas are to move forward and where there is some common ground and where there are like, is a policy choice that the political system needs to consider. So like the one that we're hearing about a lot is around like siting and permitting of a lot of new infrastructure that the findings kind of show. So a lot of new generation resources, a lot of new transmission is one of the findings. And so the perspectives around siting and permitting, some concerns around potential impacts, mitigation, also ideas around streamlining. There's all sort of trade-offs associated with those. And I think that capturing all of that in a sort of policy action that explains where different perspectives are can help policymakers make choices in the political system. So, and not answering your question completely, but trying to be honest about how I see it. Edith, do you want to add anything to that, or Joni?
I think you guys have covered it pretty well. I'll just go back to what it is that we're delivering, or that the bill asks us to deliver by November 1st. And that's really a report. And that report, I would imagine, Ruchi, as you were saying, would highlight the things that this group and the other groups have discussed that kind of highlight the need, what it is that we're missing. And this is kind of what we're getting to, I think, in the next meeting, or starting to get to, in terms of what we have and what the policy gaps are, and what more we might need. But it wouldn't get into actual draft language. I think the one way to think about the energy strategy, and like Ruchi, we've looked at a lot of other states to understand how they've done this, and what we might want to take away from what they've done, what we want to do differently. And it's really kind of a vision helping prioritize kind of near, mid, longer term priorities, and helping just bring the full picture into one place. And I think that's one of the big added values of having an energy strategy that's not just an electricity strategy. It's a strategy that cuts across the whole energy sector.
Thanks. Thanks for adding to that, Edith. I thought I saw Diane's hand up. Is it still up?
Yeah, it is. No, I just appreciate this conversation, partly because I know the bill asks or gives the authority for Odo and the work groups to make policy recommendations. So while that might not necessarily mean legislative concept drafting, I think it's good to keep in mind as we move forward about this particular group of how I feel like there's some squishy room there for us if, as a group, we do come up with something that maybe is more specific than high level. So yeah, I guess I just want to say that I feel like there might be more latitude on the policy recommendation piece of what the legislation authorized the group to do, and Odo.
Thanks, Diane.
Yeah, and maybe, sorry, I just want to add one more thing, which is that I know that we're focusing right now on policy as kind of legislative recommendations, and the way that we've talked about this in kind of previous meetings is that we're not really limited to just that. There are other areas of policy that are within scope, and I just want to make sure that that's also in the air here in the room, that there might be recommendations just for how to focus support to help overcome barriers to affordability. There could be some recommendations that go in the direction of helping to inform local governments. I know that, as Joni said, the focus is really state level, but I think that it's useful for us to just remember that it's not just legislative kind of recommendations. I think if we only did that, we'd be missing some opportunities to highlight other priorities and needs and ideas that would also help us advance our energy policy objectives.
Yes, thank you, Edith. So far, nobody's asked about the federal government, but that's come up a lot in other policy working groups. So we expect to see some of those on the sticky notes. I don't see any other hands up, so maybe we can move on. You should have received a link to a Miro board, and we've used this in a few other policy working groups, but really want to encourage, if it's not working for you, you want to try to help. So I think you should see an email from Josh as well as a link in the chat right now. So I'm going to give folks a minute to sort of click in there and join. At the same time, we have some how-to tips. So we want to pull those up. I think we're on slide 27, 28, Edith. Thank you. So while you're pulling that up, wanted to just give you a few how-to tips if you're not familiar. So basically, you know, it depends on what you're using. Hopefully you're not using your phone. We found that to be the hardest thing. I'm not going to read this out loud, but I just wanted to note that there's a toolbar in the top left of the screen, and there's a little button there to switch between the select tool and then like a hand mode. So if you're struggling to like navigate the screen, try clicking on that icon. As you can kind of see the little snip on the right side of this little screenshot here. And then another note for slide 29, if you want to go to the next slide, is that we're going to be using virtual sticky notes. You can make as many sticky notes as you want. They're sort of like a limitless stack you can pull from. Or you can make sticky notes yourself using that toolbar on the left. In either case, once you get a sticky note, you have to like select it and then you start typing. So we've got a quick activity to test this out. I also wanted to note really quick that this is a link that's really intended just for the members of the working group. So while members of the public are watching, you know, the conversation here and are welcome to sort of put their own reactions or feedback in the public comment portal, this is a link that's really specific for the members. So just like, let's see, pause and see if there's is anyone having trouble accessing the link? I see a lot of like people moving around in here, so I think it's hard for me to see whether anyone's missing. So I'm just going to give you another. Is anyone having trouble accessing the link, or are you all feeling like you're in there?
Richie, this is Jessica. I just wanted to jump in and say if anyone is on their phone and having trouble with getting into the Miro board, if you want to add items, you can feel free to send those to Jason and I through the chat, and we'll populate them for you in the Miro.
Yes, great idea. It's not the only way to add your ideas in. Okay. So you can see that Josh is sharing screen. It's like a little double universe here. So you should see like this big blue box with instructions that we just went over. You can test out some of the sticky note features, make one and write your name in. There you go. Thank you. I can see some names in there. So we're basically using this as a whiteboard, and you're invited to jot ideas down and post them to the board. We're going to go over 4 categories after this testing piece. And so the next one after testing is going to be what are the barriers or competing priorities. Just trying to like look in here to see if I see everyone's name to make sure that people I've been able to test out the stickies. Is anyone having trouble just getting a sticky and putting their name in? We had some trouble in our previous policy working group. So if I'm emphasizing this more, we just want to avoid that. I don't see anything in the chat for people having trouble, and I'm not seeing any raised hands. So I'm feeling like maybe we can move on.
Yeah, I do have
sorry,
my
no,
hand
this is-
raised.
Oh, you do? Okay, sorry about that.
I had to step away for a second. I'm not sure how to access the Miro board.
Oh, gotcha. So there's a link that you might have gotten emailed, but we'll put it in the chat again too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
I believe I'm in the Miro board, but I missed the part of the presentation where you showed us how to navigate around here.
So
Um,
let me, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
That's okay. Do you see in the share screen there's like a little cursor moving? I think that's Josh. So on your screen, you should see like a little arrow. It's a blue arrow. If you click on that, that will help you move around on the screen.
No, what I'm seeing is a start here, and I'm seeing a lot of different names, probably all the ones that are in here moving around doing different things.
Great. So we're doing kind of a test right now, Pat. So if you take that little blue arrow and click on it and kind of move yourself down to the testing, we're hoping that everyone is able to get a sticky and put their name on. So that's kind of what we're doing right now.
The blue arrow.
I see you moving actually in the shared screen. So you're in there for sure.
So what do I do? Click on the box?
You can click on a sticky note. Also, so you see the arrow, you can see like the big T. There's also like a little Post-it note looking.
All right. I think my problem here is the screen size is very small.
Okay. Yeah, in the bottom right corner, you might be able to sort of.
Yeah, I found that.
Oh, good. Okay. Thanks for asking.
All right. Thank you for helping.
You bet.
And I'll just remind, Miro is fairly new to me as well, but it is very helpful. If you find you're having difficulty kind of moving from one space of the board to another, there is an option to change your mouse between what looks like a pointer mouse and what looks like a hand. If it's in hand mode, you could like grab the screen and kind of drag it around to move. But in pointer mode, that's when you'll be able to like add text to sticky notes. So if you're trying to move and finding yourself stuck, switching between those I find is helpful.
I'm just gonna check in on Pat and Tamara. Were you able to sort of grab a sticky? We want to really make sure that you're able to add the ideas in, and if not, we can find a workaround as well.
I'm able to grab stickies, I believe.
Great.
Thanks.
Odo staff doesn't have to add a sticky. I just wanted to confirm I can follow my own directions, so I added mine. Thanks, Commissioner Doran. I also noticed that the first time that I was using this, a little new to me as well. In the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you should be able to see like a percentage where you can do like a plus or a minus, and that'll let you zoom in and out. And that has helped me to get it bigger so that I can see some of the font. Let me know if that helps. Aha, I see Pat's name. Tamara, I'm going to check back in with you. Are you able to add a sticky? Okay.
Yeah, I can add a sticky. I'm just not sure how to put my name on it. So
Gotcha. Perfect. So you add a sticky and then you use the blue arrow to click it, and then it should give you a cursor to type. Try that a couple times. That worked for me earlier.
okay. Let's see. And blue arrow. So I must have missed this when I stepped out. So I might just have to watch. So I click on the sticky.
Yeah. So like on the left toolbar, you see like that arrow, and then you see like, okay, and then you see the T, and under that there's like a little Post-it note. So
I see that, and I can move that, but I can't put my name on it.
And then if you click on that and move it over and then select it, then that's when the cursor shows up.
Oh, I think I need to go back to, I'm looking at the live screen, but I need to be in a different mode for that.
Yeah, if you click on your own browser where the link showed up, that's where you'll be able to click on it yourself. And you know, if not, we can also just like if you want to message, if it's not working for you, it's happened before, to others, like we can you can just direct message your what you want to put on a sticky, and one of our Odo staff can put that in for you too. So it's like a workaround we've done before if it's not working, Tamara.
Okay. Well. Shoot. Now it won't let me back into my row, so I don't know what I've done. I was in it and now the icon just keeps circulating.
Oh, okay. Jessica, do you want to be sort of the communicator between Tamara and the stickies since it's not really working?
Yeah, I can do that. And Tamara, if it's easier, you can send me a direct chat to give me your phone number. I could call you and kind of talk you through things, whatever works for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry to be so high maintenance.
That's okay. We're happy you're here. We want to see your stickies. Okay, let's I just want to make sure, so we did this testing, so this first question here, first prompt, is where we're going to be asking for your ideas and your stickies here. So the question here is, what are the barriers or competing priorities? And we have some prompting questions to organize the board. On the all the way on the right, there's also sort of like a catch-all space for other barriers that might not fit into one of these that you're thinking of. And then if you have an idea and you're not quite sure where it fits, you know, just put it on the right. It's fine. We'll figure it out. We just really want to see what the ideas are. Also, all the way on the left, Josh, if you want to like move it that way for people to see, I'm not sure if yeah, there we go. There's some pre-populated sticky notes. Those are actually some examples of barriers or issue statements that came up in the Environmental Justice and Equity Policy Working Group meeting that happened on Monday. And we're going to give you 5 minutes of quiet time so you can just go crazy with the stickies, put your ideas down. I'll give you a warning when there's 1 minute left. And after those 5 minutes, we'll open it up for some discussion and reactions of what you're seeing in terms of stickies. Odo staff will be looking to, and we'll be trying to see if there's any themes in here as well. Okay, so we'll start a timer for 5 minutes. About 90 seconds left, a minute and a half. And then we'll have a discussion about what we're seeing here. So put in your final sticky notes that you're thinking of. I'll also just add there's if you're, in the last minute here, there's a few terms in here if you're able to define a little bit more, like add some more information. Some of the ones that are popping out to us is what folks mean by regulatory limits. What is meant by that? What does that mean? So if you use that phrase, we'd love to hear more on a sticky note, or in that you can just click on that and add more. There's also some phrasing around like state engagement in something. So maybe talk if you have ideas about like what state engagement means in that particular way, that would be helpful to add as well if you have some ideas. Okay. I think that we are done. That doesn't mean you have to stop, but we're going to move into more of a discussion space here. Is anyone, so I'm gonna do this in two ways. One is ask for some raised hands on some initial reactions. Are you seeing anything in here that makes you curious? Do you want to ask about what a certain sticky note means? Are there themes that you're seeing that you want to surface? Just to sort of get some discussion going. I'm gonna give you a second to raise your hand if you'd like. Not seeing any initial reaction hands yet, but that's okay. Can verbalize a few and see if that kind of helps. Aha, I see a hand. Thank you so much. Jared, go ahead.
Welcome. It's my hand. I just noticed, and it may just be bias in the positioning on the chart, but there's a ton of information on small community, small scale generation and storage, and very little on transmission. And I think that may just be the order, but it may not be. It may be the representation of the group. So something I noticed.
Yeah, thank you. I see what you mean there. Other things people are noticing? So in the barriers to small scale, just to verbalize a little bit of what Jared was saying, we're seeing barriers like it's cost prohibitive, utility interconnection cooperation, land use and zoning, land availability for community scale, anticipated lack of incentives from the federal government. COU net metering policies is a sticky, but then there's also sort of just net metering policies in general as a sticky here. I'm wondering if somebody wants to come off mute and talk a little bit more about their sticky. Is there a particular sticky that you'd like to sort of explain a little bit more?
Okay, Ruchi, I will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, Look, I've worked on all sorts of different ends of these conversations, and one thing that I think is a consistent barrier for me has been cooperation with utilities around where to site this stuff. And when I say this stuff, I mean small scale community renewables, like where should we put storage that would be beneficial to the grid? Where should transmission go? Where do people want to go? Like utilities want perfect information. And from the private sector's perspective, like there's this like chicken and the egg thing, you know, conversations with utilities might be like, hey, can you tell us where you have transmission constraints so that we can think about, you know, investment in those areas. And I know that there are lots of utilities on the call right now, and I haven't talked to all of you guys, but my experience is more like, well, let's play a game of Battleship instead. You tell me where you want to go, and I'll tell you whether there's a constraint there or whether we have capacity. And I know that there's privacy concerns and security concerns, but I think there needs to be a little bit more of a dialogue around this stuff so that investments can be made in a way that's really efficient for the grid, for ratepayers, and so we can kind of fix problems as quickly as possible. Happy to discuss more, or, you know, not say anything more.
Really appreciate that. Any of the utilities on the line have thoughts on sort of the need for more information, how that feels like as a barrier in terms of needing the information, having more of a dialogue?
I just want the utilities on the call to know that I spent 12 years at utilities also. So I'm not just like firing shots. I say that also having been inside Northwest Natural and PGE and like understanding the constraints on their end as well.
Yeah, what are we talking about when we say small or community scale generation and storage? Like there's several ways that can be interpreted. What are we talking about? Okay, no one really has it. If we're talking about like storage, that'd be like what, a megawatt or so, and you're putting it to alleviate a distribution circuit or something like that. Is that what we're talking about, or are we talking about individuals who are installing Tesla Powerwalls in their homes and a program like that? Like I think the devil's a little bit in the details here on how you would structure something to try and alleviate a system or a local or larger constraint on the system. What we found quite frequently is there's economy of scale when it comes to smaller installations of these resources, and those resources, when located in specific locations, can alleviate transmission or distribution or substation needs, and kind of put off some investments, defer some investments, or replace investments. And there's some value to that, but that value, as we've looked and scoured our system, seems to be about equal to or a little bit less than that economy of scale. So that's something that we've battled. But that's, you know, we're a little more rural in nature, and it can certainly change if you're looking in urban areas versus rural areas. There's just a lot of details to get into. So I understand. Yeah, and I've seen that game of Battleship once or twice before when we talk about ideal locations on a system and privacy concerns. So I think I know what you're talking about. But yeah, internally in the utility, finding these locations and making that business case to put those out there to solve those problems is also a bit of a challenge.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Richard. Thank you, Jared. I just wanted to remind the group we are, these titles are just intended to spark thinking and kind of organizational. I think it's, if there's something specific you have in mind, helpful to acknowledge that. The group's scope generally is just everything in front of the meter. So there is a whole different policy working group focused on building efficiency, electrification, and distributed energy resources, and we recognize there's some overlap there. But do intend this conversation to be broader in what can be brought up, not limiting here.
Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah. Oh, can I jump in here?
For it, Pat. Yeah.
I think might as well. Yeah, I think the answer really is all of the above. That in fact we need to be looking at all of the ways that we need to build out our energy system, and that the distributed generation piece is going to become more and more valuable as the transmission constraints to get to those lower cost resources become more and more constrained. And so we have to be working both ends of this problem, that we need to be putting more effort into really figuring out how to better value those grid benefits that distributed resources provide. And we also need to speed up our transmission process. And I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that the utility siloed process for planning transmission doesn't work. It doesn't really provide the benefits that we as a society really need, and that we need a much more coordinated effort there to figure out where are the high value transmission lines that we need to build. How do we speed up the permitting process, but not step on people's rights, not step on people's, the concerns that people have for a variety of things. That's why siting is such a problematic process. But again, I think that a sense of community, that we are all in this together, and if we don't find ways to cooperate, we're just not going to succeed. So that's kind of my piece here. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat. Just kind of like reflecting back a little bit, and like what I'm hearing is that you're describing some barriers around not valuing services that the grid can offer. That a barrier is having separate planning processes among utility service territories. You're also identifying a barrier around the length of time it takes for transmission, siting and permitting. And I'm just phrasing it as barriers so that, I think what our team wants to be able to do is, as we move into like solutions, we want to draw some dotted lines. What was that barrier that was uncovered? So that's kind of why I'm rephrasing it that way a little bit, but I think I'm capturing what you have there. Kind of open it up. Any other sort of reflections on specific barriers that are on the sticky notes here? Thank you to Jared, Shauna, to Pat for jumping in, or reactions to what you've heard. I promise that there's a break coming, so really just get your thoughts in now so we can go to break.
I think I'll just keep talking. I think another challenge that I've noticed in my time at the natural gas company on the electric side is that there's not holistic energy planning. And so we end up with these inefficient results. Like, we have some regional planning, but like I think there's a lot of distrust from the gas company that any regional holistic look at limited direct use of natural gas, how that can help with winter peaks, and limit the amount of build out for those peak days. Like how can we look at that holistically and not be and not let perfect be the enemy of the good? I think that kind of holistic look by an unbiased agency or group would be really beneficial to the state's energy outlook. And the fact that we don't do that, I think, is problematic. We have all of these like standalone planning processes that I think are inefficient.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So barriers around inefficiency of these kind of siloed planning processes, regional planning processes not going far enough or getting detailed enough to sort of unsilo.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and then looking across energy types, I know we're talking specifically about electricity here, but like if you free up demand in the wintertime by like sipping natural gas for direct use, or combining heat pumps with like there's different end uses that could free up space on the electric system and decrease the overall investments that need to be made for those peak days.
Love it. Thank you. So glad you're here, Shauna. Jump in anytime. Let's see. I feel like we haven't really heard a ton from, I really want to hear a little bit more from some of the groups that might have specific interests or ideas around like what community scale means. I'm seeing some really great sticky notes here around sort of let me see if I can, there's also like, I'll even just say straight up, there's some bills or some legislative concept right now around GETS and around transmission authority. So I'm seeing a couple of those sticky notes, and it's okay that that's a bill that we're not, advocating for in this space, but generally how would that look? And, why is that something that's like a barrier, I guess, is as part of our buildup of a state energy strategy. I'm also seeing a few in areas that we haven't really talked about yet in terms of training and membership in unions. Local expertise is lacking. Not enough transmission engineers and planners. Wanting to see if there's any groups that might represent sort of communities specifically, or that might want to speak to that before we go to break. Jess and Shannon, when you did your introductions, you had some really good interests around sort of community specific resilience, for example. If you want to share more on that, this could be a good time in how it relates to responsible development and what barriers you see. Chris, I know there's been some really interesting analysis that CRITFIC has done recently. Laura, you had some really great things to say in your intro about TNC's work in this space as well. Just kind of inviting any other comments for discussion here on your stickies or what you're seeing.
No, I think, Sydney, I thought I saw your hand go up for a minute there. It doesn't look like it's up now, but if you have a comment you want to share.
Yeah, thanks, Joni. I was just going to play Captain Obvious for a second and note that there don't seem to be quite the same barriers to financing as these other ones, and wondered how the group might be planning to present that lack of a barrier, really, more than anything.
I'll just jump in on the barriers to in-state transmission. Somebody keeps moving my sticky. There's one about policies promoting development of transmission, mitigating capacity near load centers. And so I saw that one, and that in my mind was related to this issue of like, where are we putting the transmission? What's the interaction of that between load centers and where we think generation will happen? So I had added this sticky around connectivity to least conflict areas. And so that just spatial awareness of like, what constraints and are we trying to resolve and where are they on that larger scale? I think that also is a bit related to Shauna's point about sort of lack of that holistic planning and thinking bigger picture about what are the loads we're trying to connect to which resources and what does that mean for transmission planning.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Laura. And thanks, Sydney, on the Captain Obvious comment. I hadn't even really seen it, so there you go. So after this discussion, we're going to move to a different sort of topic to prompt some sticky notes and ideas on barriers. So kind of like last call, I guess, on this one before we go to break.
Yeah, this is Jess with Road Climate. I can jump in on kind of the community side of things. In terms of resilience and barriers, I'm really appreciating the conversation so far and absorbing everything that's being added from multiple perspectives. So grateful to be in this space. I think that with all of these issue areas, what's coming up for me is the need to balance between the desire to meet our climate goals, ensure that we have strong, resilient systems, and also the impacts that come with the development that's necessary to meet these goals. And I think on the level of transmission, since that's kind of the topic that we were just on, I think there is serious community concern around increased risk of wildfire, but also a desire for increased resilience. And I know Shannon named this earlier as well. World Climate has an office in Coos Bay as well. And the South Coast is really at the end of transmission lines. There's really one main line connecting to the rest of the grid. And so the need for additional transmission is real. And also there are serious concerns about what that could mean for local impacts and ensuring that also energy burden and energy costs are not going up in the progress that's needed on transmission.
So I'm hearing some really important barriers there around watching for impacts and cost when thinking about the build out of this new transmission, as well as just a barrier on like, how does one balance all of those? And one of the things I said earlier is like, you know, Odo alone is not writing this entire energy strategy. It's being built up, right? And I think that the way that we describe these things in the report later will be part of what that balance looks like in terms of the political process and how they take those policy options and ideas in. So really appreciate you naming that, and just putting the ideas here and having a solid discussion about it will help in moving that forward. I see Joshua's hand. I wanted to bring him in as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ruchi. Since you referenced the sticky note on grid enhancing technologies, and that was my sticky note, I'll just really briefly maybe extrapolate a little on what was intended there. So, you know, because of the pretty significant transmission constraints that we are experiencing in Oregon, there's been a lot of interest in grid enhancing technologies. These are hardware and software solutions. There's a number of them, and sort of more that are, you know, being innovated. But essentially, they create more capacity and efficiency on the grid at a relatively low cost, and also can have a positive impact on wildfire prevention by increasing sort of like monitoring in real time of lines. And we haven't really seen them deployed at a wide scale in Oregon. So there's some effort to see that we find ways to integrate those more onto the grid to have that positive impact on expanding transmission and creating more efficiency.
Thanks, Joshua. May I ask, grid enhancing technologies are an interesting solution point. Could you speak more the specific barriers you see to why they haven't been deployed more broadly today?
Yeah, well, so I think, you know, there's not a regulatory process at the moment to, you know, kind of create an assessment or evaluation of where they're most useful on the grid. I know we're not supposed to be talking about legislation, but there is a pending bill that would create a process for evaluating grid enhancing technologies and where they can be integrated into the grid. So that would be a process through the Public Utility Commission that would be part of the IRP CEP process there.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Joshua. And, you know, just to sort of what I said earlier, you know, things that are being discussed in the legislature are policy ideas. They just have a level of detail, you know, in the form of a bill that we're not getting to hear. So, you know, it's not a bright line, but we're trying to figure it out with you. You know, the purpose here is to surface the policy ideas that could be part of an energy strategy. And so we really appreciate all of this engagement on the whiteboard and the discussion. I'm going to move us to our break. We have another whiteboard activity set up for you after the break, and my colleague Jessica is going to lead you through that because I have to drop off for a different meeting. But I really wanted to just say enjoyed the conversation and your engagement, and appreciate you doing that with Jessica when she takes over after the break. So we'll come back, let's see, at 11 o'clock, and we'll see you on the other side.
Thanks, Richie. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you were able to take a nice stretch break, refill your coffee. We're gonna be moving forward in our whiteboard here, moving on to our next category on promoting resilience for local communities. And the Miro board is open. I know some people are exploring the other categories. So if you had some great ideas during the break, feel free to go back and add those to the board. Just be aware as we continue our oral discussion, we're going to be moving on to the next category. So again, the main question is, what are the barriers or competing priorities to making our communities more resilient? We've got some prompting questions to hopefully spark some ideas, and still got that catch-all on the far right or a parking lot for anything you're not sure about. We're going to have 5 minutes here for quiet time, a warning when there's 1 minute left, and then open up for discussion. I want to just acknowledge, certainly there is some overlap here with the discussion we just had, but we do want to go a little deeper. The Energy Pathways model ensures reliability, but it wasn't able to fully address resilience needs. So this is the time to talk to the barriers and competing priorities to getting a more resilient system for our local communities.
Hi, everybody. This is Jessica Rikers. I'm just going to give you a few more seconds to get some more things on there, but that doesn't mean you have to stop when we start the discussion. Just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a heads up. Okay. I see a lot of activity on the Miro board, and just as a reminder, I apologize for my Microsoft going off right there. Just as a reminder, if you're unable to get the Miro board to work for you, just send us a chat, and we'll add it to the Miro board for you. You're happy to do that. So I was noticing as I was looking at the Miro board, what people were adding there, that there's a number of comments about coordination. It seems like wanting to coordinate between the developers and the people that are working on from the utility perspective. So I'm just curious if anybody who added a comment about that coordination would want to add a few more points about that, or questions that might come up when it comes to that. When folks were bringing up the coordination aspect, were they thinking about coordination as far as just the simple interconnection and process to get the microgrids or community scale generation or storage on board? Or were they thinking more along the lines of coordination to understand how that generation or storage asset could be useful to both the grid as well as the folks who are developing it? No takers?
Not seeing any hands yet, Jessica.
Okay. I went to the Rucci school of letting awkward silences last a little bit longer just to see if anybody really was thinking about it before they spoke. Okay, well, if something comes up and you want to chat about it, feel free to raise your hand and we'll give you a moment to talk about it. But I'll just move on then to something else that I saw coming up, which is the need for technical assistance, education and training for microgrids, for community resources. And I was curious if that training was relating to like what is needed to put them to actually physically build them and interconnect them, or if the training was more focused on what communities or organizations need to know if they're interested in something like a microgrid or putting in their own community resources. I'm wondering if anybody who added those comments might be wanting to expand on that a little bit. You can also just come off of mute if you wanna talk.
I mean, I'll speak up again as somebody who's been on the utility side and on the private sector side. I mean, I think like, again, I would want to see the utilities take the lead here a little bit and say, you know, here are some places or ideas we have for storage or resiliency, microgrids, what have you, on our system. Here's how we would interconnect them. Here's a co-ownership strategy. Because ultimately, like utilities, like are the ones who know how the grid works, and they're the ones who know how energy generation resources work, and they're the ones who can manage that resource to the benefit of the grid during normal times, and then have that as an emergency, option when the grid goes down. Like one idea I had a while back that PGE did not like at that time, but maybe they would like it now, I don't know. But like, I would love to see utilities think about how to deploy or how to partner with communities on deploying small scale generation and storage at schools for the benefit of the grid, but also in emergency situations as an opportunity, like in a PSPS event or an ice storm. Like these are places that people could go and charge their phones or keep their medicine cold. And schools are community gathering places already. And so like those sorts of like, how do we make this work instead of this can't work because, I think is the shift that needs to happen. And again, my experience, not trying to, shoot arrows or anything.
Thanks, Shauna. That's really interesting discussion. And it makes me wonder too, like there's almost a synergistic activity there where building these could benefit the local community or the local organization like schools, but it could benefit the utility. And so there's some level of potential need to understand what those costs and benefits are between those two groups, but where that could actually help each other. For instance, schools, that could bring down the operating cost of the school if they were able to access the generation there on site to help reduce their total energy use.
Well, and just to add to that, like, I'm in Portland Public Schools, and the infrastructure, the HVAC systems are super outdated. They have a really hard time with like smoke during smoke season, and there's no AC. And during the strike a year and a half ago, teachers were begging for better infrastructure, and the schools just like simply don't have the money.
Yeah.
And I think, utilities are in a good position to think about like, how do we partner? How do we bring in grants? How do we like make this work for us as well as these students who are also, by the way, like our customers?
And schools also have a lot of open roof area that could be utilized and interconnections that would be much easier to implement than the larger interconnections that you have to go through for large centralized generating assets. And then the schools also can double as emergency centers during emergency situations. So they can provide resilience as well. And I think this is a huge community economic development opportunity that utilities really need to lean into. So thank you, Shanna, for bringing that up.
Thank you both for raising that. I think the education opportunity there and need and call for cooperation makes a lot of sense. I know on the prior category, we saw some post-it notes on lack of capacity at the local level to kind of plan and implement projects can be a barrier. I wonder if there are any utilities on the line that have had successful projects where barriers were overcome that they can speak to.
Notice
Shanna, I see you're off.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say Hannah was off mute, and then I've got a couple hands up. So John and Shannon are both have their hands up as well. Hannah, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, no, I don't have a hand raised. I just left my computer, so I had to unmute myself so that I could talk if called on.
Gotcha.
So here I am.
No problem.
Sorry.
No problem.
Back. No worries.
Yes. Okay, so it looks like John, who is with Eugene Water and Electric Board, has his hand raised. Go ahead, John. John, are you there? It looks like you're off mute, but we're not hearing you. You might need to click next to the mute button. There's a caret there, and adjust your microphone to the one that's active.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I heard a call for a successful model, and I'm sorry I had my hand up before the call for the successful model. One of the things I put out there is for similar, microgrid projects that there's oftentimes what we've experienced is kind of unclear ownership, benefit, and control issues. And so we have a very specific example where we built emergency water stations co-located with school sites. They have batteries, a Connex box full of, equipment that can be used to set up an emergency water station. One of the things that we discovered, and solar panels on the roof of the school, but there's some real issues around like whether or not that station can be appropriately used as a microgridded solution, because the school is not in the business of being a utility, it's in the business of being a school. And literal like issues around like whether or not eWeb would be able to use the solar panels on the school in order to locally power batteries and run a water distribution center versus the school needing that same equipment for their own purposes, potentially in some sort of recovery effort, created real issues. And so I think that like on some level, creating some of these microgrid solutions, we have a couple others as well, but that's just a very specific one, creates a real question of okay, so who is the microgrid being developed for? And is there real control for the purpose in which it was developed and intended?
Thank you for elevating those barriers, John. Appreciate it.
I just want to add before I hand it over to Shannon that some of the things that are being discussed right now, these were discussed in our environmental justice and equity work group as well. There's a lot of interest in what the microgrids and renewable resources at an organizational community level could do to benefit their communities, but there's definitely barriers there in understanding exactly what the ability is and how much the costs are, and getting back to what John said, which is like, who owns this? How do we maintain it and operate it in the best way possible? So this work is going on in at least 2 different working groups, if not more. And I see Shannon's hand is up, so I'll pass it to her, and then after Shannon is Pat.
Thank you. I wish I had a golden shining example of what works, but I will provide 2 examples, one from the IOU space and one from the COU space for projects I'm involved in. On the IOU space, we had hoped that the distribution system planning upgrade and modernization process that we spent a lot of time going through at the PUC would bring some of these solutions to the forefront, meaning the very beginning of the distribution system planning process. And I think ideally, I'm not putting this on the IOUs. This is an update. This is an upgrade to everyone's work streams, policies, software, all of it. I get it. It's a very heavy lift. But any ways that we can set up our IOUs to work collaboratively very early in the process with our communities that frankly don't have the internal capacity to knock on the IOU's door and say, hey, we need something at our school or our water treatment system. So maybe there's a solution that there could be a short list that's defined of critical facilities so that the IOUs could kind of start with those when they are entering into a DSP process. I know we're talking about behind the meter there, but it would just kind of flag those critical facilities where some resilience benefits could be realized for the communities, but even during tradition, just run-of-the-mill times when the utility is not done, could also potentially improve the power quality for those communities at the end of the line. So out here, it's Pacific Power. We have our schools shut down all the time. We have outages quite frequently, and we have a very low income population here. For a lot of these kids, that means they don't get lunch that day if they don't get to school. So very, very important. On the COU side, we're working with Coosa Electric Co-op, who would love to embrace a microgrid, multiple microgrids within their domain, but they have outdated net metering policies if we're talking about that side of the grid, and they have concerns about potentially violating their provider of choice contract with BPA if they move to the other side of the meter with their microgrids. So very intentional and supportive COU that just doesn't have the policies in place yet. And we're working to help them hopefully support that on the net metering side. But on the BPA side, I'm not really sure how to help them there.
Thanks for raising those examples, Shannon. I think two things I'm hearing is that lack of information can be a barrier for utilities as well to understand what the community wants and what to prioritize to meet local needs, but also that regulatory uncertainty can get in the way of utilities doing things as well. Thank you for elevating those.
Yeah, I would just add one more, and I didn't do a good job of stating that, but the utilities understanding what the communities need, and those of us that are in the communities understanding where the utilities networks can actually host that capacity. So some of those transparency issues that were addressed for larger scale systems are still relevant at the microgrid space.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. So I'm just going to give a time check on this. So we've got about 3 more minutes, and I see Pat's hand is raised, so I will pass it over to Pat. But if there's anything else folks want to add, please feel free to raise your hand or throw it into the chat. I'm like NASA control right now, trying to monitor about 8 screens, but I'm going to do my best to stay on top of it. So Pat, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I want to thank Shannon and John for those real world examples. Because, you know, in theory, it's as simple as a developer or the utility goes to the school and says, I want to rent your rooftop and I'm going to pay you, a monthly fee for that. And I will also provide you with certain emergency services during certain conditions. But obviously it's not as simple as that. And so I'd like to dig in a little bit more to John about some of the specific issues and what kind of resolutions would you like to see as a utility? Because again, I think to me, it makes more sense for the utility to have maybe not necessarily ownership, but control over those assets, making sure that in certain situations, the community's needs are provided first, but on other occasions, it should be for the benefit of the grid. But again, maybe you can expand on that.
There's probably myriad issues here. And you know what, I think I see some other stickies here around maybe unclear, say for like microgrids, for example, what constitutes a utility or who is a utility. UWEB doesn't necessarily need to have clear and direct control over all things, but as UWEB providing kind of central utility services for our community, it becomes hard for us to help support, say, setting up, say, like a microgrid that may support communications or emergency services when needing to partner with, entities that don't normally do that. So again, the example here was, with a school. And so setting up clarity in roles at the onset of the development of these projects is really, really important. And those roles will very likely help to define, what truly can be capable or expected of these systems, i.e. if UWEB, for example, owns all of the equipment and has direct control over the equipment and basically says, yes, we're going to be using this to charge batteries, to run a water station, or to run communication towers or something like that, which may mean these solar panels, which could also feed this school, will not be feeding this school simultaneously. There needs to be a clear understanding of both the ownership and the operating agreements associated with these things. And I think the complexity of the different types of relationships we have, a lack of clear model that just can be deployed over and over and over again, really, I think, makes it hard, because all of these conversations basically become very organic, hard to scale, requiring a great deal of study and discussion before we can, go to implementation. And so I think that that's kind of the general set of issues that we see is it's not really an off-the-shelf standard product that we can try to deploy cost effectively. They really are custom projects, which at small scale are hard to implement.
Thank you for raising that. I'm so sorry to cut this conversation off, but we're running a little late and we've got 2 more categories to cover. But I'm excited to see if we can continue that conversation as we move into policy gaps and potential solutions in the next meeting. So stay tuned. If we all scroll down, I think in the interest of time, we're going to invite people to add sticky notes and after our quiet time here, speak to comments on both the 3rd and 4th categories we've got on the whiteboard. So our 3rd category is enhancing the availability and efficient usage of transmission regionally. And that's closely related to our 4th category, which is fostering regional collaboration and efficient resource sharing. I know we've been in the railroad world for a long time, but I have a quick reminder here as we think about the model and how it worked. It had a lot of efficiencies in it, more efficiencies than we have today. So it kind of, I think, raises a question of whether there's an opportunity there for us to pursue those efficiencies and see how that circles back to reducing the challenge of building and siting and expanding. So I think, again, we'll take maybe 5 or so minutes here for a little quiet time. Thank you. This is your 1-minute reminder. Remember, we're filling in both this category and the last one on the board. Welcome back. I love that little chime. If you have your sound on Miro, it makes a very soothing sound when the timer runs out.
Totally. So Joni, I don't see any hands raised, but if anybody does have something they want to expand on or ask questions about, feel free to raise your hand in the chat. We're keeping an eye on that. And Joni, I'm curious if in looking at what people are throwing into the availability and efficient usage of transmission regionally, if that anything is rising to the top for you in there.
Yeah, got a lot of good stuff here. I feel like there's one sticky I'm not sure I fully understand under the other barriers listing state mandates to consumer-owned utilities. I wonder if the person who wrote that could explain what you mean of barriers there.
Yeah, if you want to come off mute, you can do that at the bottom of your screen. There should be an unmute button on left of center. If not, that's okay. Again, I see a lot of things coming up around coordination, lack of or an uncertainty around, how we can have a more regional approach to some of the things that are going on with transmission in the area. And I'm curious if anybody would like to expand on their thoughts around that. I'm not seeing any hands raised.
I can push. I see one sticky here on the regional collaboration with a couple of thumbs up on lack of an RTO, regional transmission organization. And I wonder if anyone who wrote that or gave it a thumbs up wants to unpeel some of the layers there on the barriers to why we don't have an RTO and whether there's opportunity there.
Well, that was my sticky note, but I see Sydney put a thumbs up, so I would definitely defer to her. Much richer understanding of the situation.
Sorry, gang, you caught me multitasking. I assume we are talking about lack of an
Was that-
RTO.
Yeah, I was asking to pull back some of the layers on kind of what are the barriers behind that of barriers to having an RTO in our region.
Oh boy, you know, Johnny, let's have lunch. This is like a 20-year, 30-year conversation. It's come up repeatedly in the region, and it has failed. I have lots of candid answers that are halfway jokes and halfway real, but I'm just going to save them. But I'm happy to talk to you later too.
Yeah, would love to do that. Let me rephrase and narrow down, Sydney. Do you think there's any barriers there that are gonna be things you want to connect the dots to as we move into policy gaps in our next meeting?
I think
Is it
I think just noting that it is an ongoing barrier. I think it will happen eventually, right? It will happen eventually. It's full of barriers. It's ripe with conflict. But just noting that we are moving in that direction, potentially on a very slow, bumpy up and down path, I think would be helpful for the purposes of this group.
Thank you. I know I'm playing a little bit of Captain Obvious, but love the sticky notes, but do want to get into the devil in the details, as I think Jared was mentioning earlier. So thank you all for that. And yeah, Sydney, you can maybe comments is a better place than lunch, but not opposed to lunch. I think Pat, I see your hand up.
One of the things I've heard from Fred Hewitt, who is a much more of a transmission expert than I am, is that this region needs to take a stepwise approach to an RTO, that we can't do it in one step. And I don't know enough to know what a next logical step might be, but I think that that is something that this group should think about. You know, there is, as already in the comments, you know, there is legislation in play right now that would create an Oregon Transmission Authority. Is that the right next step, or were there other steps after that that we want to think about? And so, yeah, I think those are all very important questions.
Thank you, Pat.
Given the current activity of day-ahead markets with CAISO's EDAM and Southwest Power Pool, depending on how those new decisions play out and where Bonneville heads and some other things that will occur in the very near term, hopefully, that may kind of force the next step in an RTO ultimately, because now you're going to have fragmented systems, but covering a wider path. So it may not be inclusive. It may not be exclusive to just Oregon. It would be a broader snapshot of the region, but I think that has the potential to force an RTO to start incrementally, painfully coming along. So.
Thank you for that.
Jenny, Alec is having trouble coming off mute, and he did put a comment in the chat, but I'm going to see if we can get him unmuted so he can participate here. Just letting him know that we're working on it.
Yeah.
There I go. That worked.
Yay! Great.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just couldn't get there. What I meant by that comment is just we often see, and again, this is more in legislation, that folks don't tend to appreciate the distinctions between the investor-owned utilities and the consumer-owned utilities. And so when we talk about, you know, must do this and must do that, it's a different conversation, because, you know, we're member-owned, we're accountable to our members, we work with them, and it's not in our interest to throw roadblocks. And at the same time, you know, some of the policies that we're seeing, for example, the GETS, you know, again, it's only at the investor-owned utilities, I get it, but, you know, we are doing that already. You know, there are a lot of things that are happening that, again, that maybe there's not awareness of it, but to be thrown in the same bucket. And I'm not throwing shooting arrows either at the investor-owned utilities. It's the education part of understanding the structural differences and keeping those in mind in these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking to that, Alec. I think it harkens the conversation we're having around the need for information and transparency and coordination across, and understanding what I was saying earlier today, that not all policy solutions need to be one size fits all. But appreciate you speaking to that. I think we've got a lot of sticky notes on the board. Anyone want to vocalize something they wrote down?
Joni, there was a sticky note that I was curious about, which somebody had written. There are market uncertainties around long-term, day ahead, and they were referencing large new loads, the Western Resource Adequacy program that's actively working to help coordinate across different energy providers. I'm just curious if anybody wants to jump in and kind of highlight some of the market uncertainties that they're thinking about with that sticky.
Sure. And I think I've articulated them, but I guess in the large new loads, one of the areas that has been fascinating is some of those loads are taking matters into their own hands. So we have on the one hand whether it's BPA or an IOU or a COU that has huge large new load request, and big data with big dollars isn't happy with the response, whether the timeline's too long or it's too uncertain whether their load will be met. And we see private development of resources. Up in Washington State, we're seeing private development of transmission lines, private and tribal collaboration. So there's just another level of complexity and uncertainty that jumps into the mix. To be fair, for those that are in the position of planning and procuring advanced transmission and trying to coordinate with others, just a lot of uncertainty in all of those markets.
A lot of actors. Thank you, Shannon.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Shannon brought up the large loads, which I think are primarily data centers, and they have, as Shannon pointed out, sometimes moved as fast as they could within the constraints that they have. Are there barriers that come up as a result of these large loads who are trying to meet their business needs as quickly as they're able to meet them, but in the course of doing that, they could be throwing up some additional roadblocks or challenges as we move forward? I wonder if anybody has any thoughts around that.
An observation from some of my work north of the river is that Microsoft is building their own transmission lines. So they have, we've got PUDs that are thinking about long-term transmission build outs, and now the price for the right-of-ways has been elevated by the private sector taking those matters into their own hands. And then the PUDs wondering, well, do you still need this load? And how many of your other big data friends are you going to be taking care of with this transmission? So it really is, they're not trying to make things more uncertain. They're just trying to move forward with their business plan and their services, but it's adding to the complexity where we see it going forward. And this kind of regional collaboration and efficiency of resource sharing would really go a long way to bring all the players to the table if we can figure out how to do that.
Thanks, Shannon. I want to segue. There's another comment I see, and I'm not entirely sure what's meant. It's up under the regional transmission barriers to financing, and it just says flexibility in. I'm afraid this one might have gotten cut off as the person was typing it. Does the author want to speak to that?
had my cursor next to it for a moment and then realized someone might think I was the author. So I wanted to clear that up right now. I don't know what it means.
All right. Well, I feel better. I'm not the only one. Thank you, Jared. I think we've got a few more minutes left on the whiteboard before we're going to have to go back to next steps and adjourn. I'm not seeing other hands, so Jessica, maybe we can open it up if there's anything anyone saw or wrote today that they want to speak to.
Just in general, a quick comment from me where we've had, and I talked about it in my opening statement about like B2A, Boardman to Hemingway, and how long it's taken to cite that. It's an urgent need, and I don't know quite how to fix it, but we have hundreds of thousands of pages that we filed for that permit, and we've been, it just seems like it's a waiting game, and it's difficult to get through the process, and the process is not made for a transmission line that spans a long distance, especially over a couple of states. So things can trigger restudies, additional looks into that permitting process, and it just doesn't get done. And in the meantime, with the utility, if you're depending on that capacity, you're building other resources. So it becomes an issue as far as costs to all of the customers and reliability on the system as well. That spans like 4 or 5 comments that I'm seeing in there. So
yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just noting that, as Joni said, and we've talked about in other meetings, we're going to move into a more solutions-focused discussion next time. And so I don't want to dive into that here, but really getting everybody's thoughts around that particular issue of permitting. It's challenging. There's a lot of reasons why things are the way they are, and there's a lot of reasons why things need to evolve to be in this new world that we're in. And so all of you, I just encourage you to really put your thinking caps on, to quote my 4th grade teacher, and get to into that headspace of what things we can do that would be beneficial in that respect. This group is like an amazing group of people to really see where there might be some alignment in needs and how we address barriers in that respect. So that's a really good one to be thinking about for the next meeting coming up. I don't see any other hands raised. I'm curious though if there's anybody else who wants to flag some barriers that they see across any of the things that we talked about today. And that includes, like, how do we facilitate responsible development of electricity infrastructure in Oregon? Like, what are the barriers to that? What are the barriers to promoting resilience for local communities? And we talked quite a bit about what are the barriers to enhancing the availability and the efficiency of our transmission regionally. Efficient usage, I should say. And what are those barriers to regional collaboration and resource sharing? So I'll just flag that. Oh, I see Commissioner Doran's hand is up. So Commissioner, can you come off mute? Maybe Josh, can you try to unmute Commissioner Doran? There you go.
Yeah, sorry about that. And sorry about the issues today. I want to go back to kind of the previous comments discussing barriers on and kind of identify them on a more regional geographical area. As a commissioner in a county that has is served by 3 different utilities, and all on an economic development path and in a very much a growing community. It has to be realized, and we keep talking about it as barriers, but these, whether it's projects with a 1 million square foot Walmart distribution center being converted to 100% robotics or 80% robotics with a huge energy load, these customers are paying their way not only as they go, but these customers are paying their way and paying it forward. They're investing in more than just the distribution that facilitates their use. Whether it be an investor-owned or consumer-owned, I'm not sure we should be looking at some of these development projects, and the same with some of the renewables, with their community development locally. I'm not sure we should be looking at these as much as barriers or as much, at least the way we view it is we look at it as examples of success and paths forward, not barriers to moving this discussion along. I just wanted to put that in there because I think the developers, the projects themselves, the high energy users, really kind of get put in the way and called a barrier a lot of times, and that's just truly not the case, at least in our experience, and that's with consumer-owned, investor-owned, and municipal utilities. So I think it needs to be said, and I understand that there are views that are different than that, but at least our experience has not been that. So thank you.
Thank you. I see, Jessica, you noted in the chat some barriers can be opportunities as well. And I think this harkens back to our key considerations of what some might consider a barrier, someone else considers a competing priority, and we have to recognize that opportunities around economic development or an example of something that could be fully captured in our modeling. So appreciate you elevating that, Commissioner Doran. I think we need to move on to our next steps, unless Jessica, is there anything I'm missing?
I think I can just wrap that all back up to what Edith presented in the earlier I'm sorry, Joni, you presented about the different ways that we can be assessing these different policy actions. So the model provides one area of thought, but economic development and jobs is another area that we want to look into, and what different actions could do for environmental needs and interests, or environmental justice and equity. Like, all of these things are a balance, and I think the most important thing is that sometimes a barrier from one viewpoint could be an opportunity from another, and that's going to be the challenging part of the work from this group, is trying to kind of sort through those and understand those things well. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to wrap it up in a nice little bow there.
Yeah, thank you. All right, it's almost lunchtime. We've got a couple of next steps. I promised we'd see the schedule again before we all go. Just to remind you all, on March 7th, next Friday, from 10 to 11 is office hours. If you have questions about the modeling, really encourage you to join us to speak directly with Jeremy Hargreaves, our consultant. That is the time this group will be focused. If you can't join, as I mentioned, there are other times. The other groups will be meeting, but they may have a lot of questions, so it's not necessarily certain your question would get in. If you have any questions about that timing, let me know. I know I sent an email with some more details. We've also got coming up on March 13th, our webinar on some of the complementary analyses results. There's more coming later, but we'll have some to share that day. So ask you all to please attend that or review the recording before we all meet again on March 17th. Really looking forward to continuing this conversation of reviewing kind of what we heard today on barriers and diving a bit deeper into policy gaps and policy solutions. Next slide, please, Edith. So just a reminder, these are some questions encourage you to think about over the coming weeks. We previewed the energy policy landscape. We'll be sharing those slides when they're up on the website. But if you could think about what are the existing policies in place that help address these barriers, where are additional policies or programs needed, or adjustments to existing policies or programs needed, and generally, what are the policy gaps that you want to discuss? As always, our comment portal is open. So if you have further thoughts after today, feel free to use that. And if you have any questions between now and our next meeting, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I want to say thank you all so much for joining us and spending your morning with us. And I hope you all have a wonderful lunch and rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, team.
Thank you.